Next up is Senator Thune.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to both of you. It's good to have you here. Dr. Haffajee, congratulations on your nomination, and thanks for your service at HHS to date. I believe this was covered in your staff interview, but I want to be sure to bring it up on the record. As policymakers, we are evaluating long-term telehealth policies for when the public health emergency is over. It would be helpful for the agency to be able to provide Congress data on utilization trends, including by modality, such as audiovisual and audio only, as is currently permitted now. Is this something that HHS could commit to doing if you're confirmed?
Thank you for the important question, Senator Thune. Telehealth has been so important during the pandemic. We've really learned so much already, but need to continue these evaluations as well. ASPE has done a fair amount of work on telehealth utilization across payers, across populations, and some by modality, as much as we can identify that, and shown vast increases, but also some disparities that need to be addressed as well. And so, yes, I would commit to continuing to evaluate that, and I think the modality issue is very important, as you note.
Okay, thank you. When discussing the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, Secretary Becerra recently stated, and I quote, "If there's something that we can do, we will find it and we will do it at HHS," end quote. If confirmed, what role do you expect you might play in finding something that HHS can do?
Thank you for the question, Senator Thune. HHS is committed with reproductive health services and all health and human services to meet the needs of beneficiaries, but also to follow the law, and I would commit to doing both. ASPE's role really is to support, if asked by the Secretary, any data and evidence on these issues.
So just to follow up that, if you wouldn't be directly involved in the response, you do anticipate that the office would be involved in future efforts to conduct research to support HHS's pro-abortion policy?
Thank you for the question. Again, if asked, this has not been a major area of ASPE's focus in the past, but if asked, looking into issues like access, what the data actually says about that to inform decisions.
Dr. Shambaugh, on April 8th of last year, you wrote a piece for Brookings titled, and I quote, "Don't overreact to inflation data this spring," end quote. The average inflation rate in March of that year when the American Rescue Plan became law was 2.6%. The following month, the inflation rate was 4.2%. Since that time, the U.S. inflation has skyrocketed to 8.6%, which is a 40-year high. Food, gas, and shelter have contributed to some of the biggest price increases, and tomorrow's Consumer Price Index figures could be even higher. Behind these historically high inflation numbers are Americans who are experiencing real financial challenges, particularly the less fortunate among our society. My question is, do you expect U.S. inflation to continue to increase, and how long do you expect an elevated level of U.S. inflation to be the norm?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I guess in terms of what do I expect from inflation, I'd say recent inflation that we've seen, say, in the last 6 months, a great deal of it has been a response to to Russia's invasion of Ukraine in terms of what we've seen in commodity markets, in particular in energy markets. Those things seem to be priced in. So I think on average, many economists, at least every forecast I've seen, expects to see inflation to start to come down. The piece you referred to was actually talking about an issue that will be relevant here, which is that we typically measure inflation as the change over 12 months. And then we were worried about the fact that the 12 months ago would have been the peak of the pandemic, and so data was going to look very odd for a little bit. I think in terms of what we expect to see inflation going forward, the same issue will be there, which is there were spikes in energy and commodity prices at the start of the Russian invasion. Those will sit in the 12-month inflation data for a considerable amount of time still.
Well, let me just, because I think, with all due respect, South Dakotans, and I would imagine most Americans, have literally had it up to here with inflation. And I don't think they believe that the Biden administration is taking it seriously. And To your point, energy is a perfect example of that. The energy policy, I think there's a direct correlation between policy decisions made by the administration and what the American people are experiencing at the pump. And I would argue the same thing with respect to spending and taxing. And we're talking now about another spending and taxing proposal. To the degree that Congress has something to say about fiscal policy, it seems to me that's the absolute wrong prescription at a time if you're trying to get inflation under control. The $2 trillion spending last year, and I just mentioned the statistics went 2.6 to 4.2 to 8.6. It's clear that the supply and demand are out of equilibrium. And a lot of that has to do with energy and the shutdown of American energy production, and I think the spending and tax and spending and regulatory policies administration. So I just urge you to take it with the utmost seriousness, because I know the American people are, and it's affecting them in a very direct way and their pocketbooks on a daily basis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Thune. Senator Daines.